Hey everybody, welcome to episode 102 of Making It. I'm Bob Clagett here with Jimmy Diresta.
Hello guys, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm good, doing better. You know, we lost Lucky this weekend, so it was a tough weekend.
Oh man.
Yeah, it was a tough weekend, so we kind of just lazied around, Taylor and I, and just, hanging around with the other animals. But I'm getting back in the shop today, and, I'm getting back. Lucky lived a good long life, so we're happy that he kind of went by natural causes and, not any other weird way. So
yeah.
And he did live to at least 14. We don't know his original age, but he's, as far as I can track back, that's about how old he is. So he could be older. So, yeah.
That's rough, man. Sorry to hear that.
Yeah, no, thank you. And thank you to everybody that's been sending some really sweet notes through email and, through comments and stuff. So, and, it kind of got out there and a lot of people were curious. So I just kind of let everybody know what was going on. Just because people, a lot of people like animals and they know I do too. So,
yeah.
So that's that. But besides that, I'm just getting back in the shop today. I got my Tormac going and I was able to do a pocket. I'm making the Witchblade 3, the knife that I have where the handle is a multi-tool. So I'm making a new third version of that. And I'm still developing a patent for that. My friend is patenting that for me. And so I'm trying to make a CNC file that's sort of open source. I might just give the file away, but then if I end up making them myself, I'll sell them for a good design for the handle that works with an existing Leatherman. So I'm just playing around with that. And on my Instagram, you saw me at least cut the pocket. And the reason I didn't do any more than that is because I'm just kind of dipping my toe in the water with the Tormac, and then I don't have a final design yet. So I'm going to dig that hole out like you saw on my Instagram, and then from there, I'm going to just sculpt the rest of it by hand using the Bridgeport a little bit and the rest on the bandsaw. And then once I have a really good solid model, then I'll re-engineer it in Fusion and then have a file that I could then send to the Tormac to cut out of a final chunk. So that's my process. I know it's ass backwards, but it's working for me right now in my limited know-how of the software and the machine. You could always go back to just using hand tools. So I'm like in between both worlds right now.
Nice. Well, also with us today, David Picciuto.
Hey, hello.
Hey, Dave.
How are you?
Very good. So I'm just going to go into what I'm working on. Kelly and I just filmed our Christmas special. I think I promised everybody last week that I was going to do the 3D printed cookie cutters and make some cookies.
Oh, yeah.
That video got delayed, and we ended up filming it over the weekend. Kelly and I did it together, and we kind of made it like a little make something holiday special, and it was fun. It was messy.
That's awesome.
It was awesome, yeah. And I'm halfway through the edit now, and I'm like, this is one of my favorite videos.
What about it made it your favorite?
Well, I think because Kelly and I were having such a good time. It was Saturday night. It was late at night, and my buddy Bruce sent us a bottle of whiskey, so we broke open the whiskey and made cookies, and we just made it fun. And so as far as when somebody asked me what I want for a gift for Christmas or birthdays or whatever, I always, instead of asking for physical things, I always like moments or memories. To me, that's worth more. And then I don't get a bunch of stuff that I don't want. And so this was like, it was so fun. Like, it was one of those moments like, oh, I'm going to remember this for a long time, because it was just an awesome moment. And then another video that I'll have coming out, or should be out by the time you hear this, is a dog ramp for our wiener dog to get up onto the bed, because he cannot jump up there on his own.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, I am putting out this week, it will have been out, I guess, by the time the show comes out, a trike, part one of a trike build. It's just part one. It's 2 parts. I don't know if you guys remember the green machine, if you had that when you were growing up. I don't know.
Totally. I remember the commercials, and I actually know the guys that invented it.
Really?
I know them through the toy business, yeah.
Wow.
I should have talked to you before I did the project. So it's basically like a big wheel. For anybody that doesn't know, it's like a big wheel, but instead of steering with the front, like handlebars, you have these 2 levers, and you pull one forward and one backward, and they turn the back axle. So
it's so dangerous.
Steering with the rear of the vehicle, and it's really strange. It takes a while to get used to.
That's the way a forklift works. It's the same way a forklift.
Especially if it doesn't work very well. It's tough to get used to. So, I mean, mine did work, but there's a lot of stuff that I'm going to go back and change about it, and update and fix to make it easier to control. So I'll probably end up doing, it's going to be a 2-part video, but I'll probably end up doing a follow-up at some point after the fact to fix some of the stuff that I came across. So, but it's been really interesting. I mean, it's made out of a bed frame and an exercise bike and a pair of crutches, which I ended up not really using the crutches. They weren't strong enough, but so I just tried to, build something crazy out of some found materials, and it was a lot of fun. Pretty cool. A lot of work though, man. It was.
Did you use the welder?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh,
so
cool.
I ended up I needed square tubing. So I took the bed frame, which was angle iron, and basically made my own square tubing out of the 2 pieces of angle, which is way more work than it should be. Totally not worth it. Don't ever do that. Anybody listening, not worth it.
But you know what? A lot of people don't realize about bed frames is that they're hardened steel. They're not just regular general purpose steel. So when somebody wants to use something like you try and use a cutoff wheel on the bed frame, the cutoff wheel disappears before you even get through one angle because the steel is hardened. It's not just straight up that you would buy from the hardware store.
Yeah. It's definitely hard. I mean, I found that out just trying to cut through it. I was able to cut through it, but it took a lot more than I expected. And then, drilling through it for different things, I had to slow everything down, use oil and all that stuff. But so it was an interesting project. I learned a whole lot of stuff from it, that's for sure.
That's what's important.
That's right. So, yeah, that's what I've been up to. And then this weekend we took some family time, went down to Florida, saw some family for kind of a pre-Christmas visit. And so I took a few days off, and here we are, back at it.
Yeah.
Are we having a show next week? We didn't talk about this before.
What is next week? Is it Christmas Eve or Christmas Day?
Well, it's the day after Christmas.
We can get on and talk about what we got for Christmas.
That's true. We could have a short Christmas episode. I don't know. We'll figure it out. We may not have a show next week.
Let's ask the viewers.
See.
If you want an episode next week, let us know in the comments down below. We'll see what they say.
Yes.
There's going to be that one guy. You guys should take a break.
Yeah, one guy.
And then we'll do it.
Like, yes.
We'll do it.
We have to have is one person. That's right.
Minority rules.
So today, I thought we'd talk about 3D printing.
Yeah.
Right on.
Something pretty new to you guys that I know you're kind of both, dabbling in. And I know a lot of people are right now. So, and a lot of people may end up getting printers for Christmas. So it might be an interesting thing to talk about. And I've got a fair amount of experience with it now, so I can talk on it forever. But I'm really curious about you two. I'm curious about. I know your experience with it so far, but other people may not. So I'm curious to hear what you thought about it, what you're using it for now, and what you plan to use it for in the future.
Well, I just got the Delta Printer Go. Is that what it's called? They sent it to me in exchange for a video, and that's actually going to be my Christmas video that you all hopefully see. And there was a learning curve. I think it went pretty much as expected, except my first few prints as I'm trying to learn how to use this thing, well, I had about a 50% success rate. And I'll take most of the blame. A couple other things I just wasn't real clear to me on how the printer worked, but got it all figured out. And boy, it takes a long time to print something. So one little cookie cutter is about an hour and 15 hours to print. And the way the printer that I have is set up, it doesn't have a place to put the spool. So right now the spool kind of sits on the desk. And if you don't tend to it every 15, 20 minutes to make sure that the what's that stuff called? Filament. To make sure it doesn't get tangled or is being fed through correctly. Because if not, if it gets caught, then I got to start all over. So
I will say, not to talk bad about them, but that is a major design flaw. That should be a part of the printer.
I thought so too. So I don't know anything about that. So most of them have some place to put the spool.
Oh yeah, that's the only printer I've ever seen.
Okay.
That doesn't have a spool holder.
Yeah. And that's probably one of the reasons it's cheaper than most, I would assume, because there's There's things in there that the major ones don't have, or the bigger ones don't have. But after I got a few, I learned how it works. I was able to make a bunch of cookie cutters. But learning how to use the printer is only half the battle. The other half of the battle is learning how to design
Make
in
a
3D.
file.
Make a file, yeah. I got lucky enough where I found a website called CookieCaster. We talked about them last week, where you can just draw right on the screen and it spits out the file that you need. Now, when I get onto more complex things, my next thing I'm going to make is a little iPod holder that clips onto the lens of my camera, because my camera doesn't have a back that flips out so you can see what you're recording. So I'm going to make a little holder for an iPod on there so I can actually see my selfie. And so I will use Fusion. I'm assuming that's what you're going to tell me to use. Every time we talk about Fusion, you'll hear radio silence from me because I know nothing about it, and I have about 10 minutes of experience with it. But that'll be the next thing I need to learn.
Nice.
Speaking of Fusion, Bob,
Yes.
it happened to be the same few days that Fusion had like a cloud breakdown a couple weeks ago. For those of you that don't know, Fusion had like a cloud crash, and so they were offline for a little while. But I noticed I was trying to make something in Fusion, and then I went to the 3D section in Cam, and it wasn't highlighted. Is that because I don't have like a full package, or is that because of that particular day? Would you know that answer?
I have no idea. I've never actually used any of the Cam stuff in Fusion, so I'm not familiar.
Okay, I just haven't had a chance to go back and look, to see if because the 3D selection in the Cam aspect was not highlighted, so I wasn't able to choose it. But it was that same day that the cloud was down. But on my 3D experience, Jacob has been hanging out with me in the shop. You guys met Jacob in Boston. And Jacob right away wanted to play with the Delta, so when we opened it up, he right away went to town and learned how to use it. But he kind of knew what he was doing. And then the next couple of days, I wanted to try and show it to my students. And so I went to do a test print by myself. And I kept starting, and the print wasn't starting to come out. The filament was not extruding any material. And I tried 3 or 4 different ways. But, Bob, you gave me some tips. You said that gear is probably stripping the amount of plastic that's right there to be fed. So I'd have to kind of push past it physically. And then maybe that would work. So I didn't get a chance to get back to it. But I, too, was having the problem of trying to make a file. So I just went to Thingiverse, and I was trying to make letters, and that's what I was trying to do with my students, is make 3D letters. So I went to Thingiverse, and I downloaded a couple different 3D letters that I found, and I was able to at least send them to the printer, and then the printer did its thing, but nothing came out, so it printed the letters in ghost form. But yeah, no, the filament wasn't even coming out, and I tried a couple different times, and it didn't occur to me. I just thought that I was doing something wrong. I didn't think that maybe the machine was having a malfunction. So, but next time I go to do that, I'm going to try and just reset the filament so that it's probably stripping on that gear, like you said.
Yeah. Unfortunately, on that particular type of extruder, it has a hardened brass gear that moves the filament along. And if it gets stuck, where the filament gets stuck at all, it'll start just grinding through the filament. Once it grinds through, the filament that it's grinding off fills up the space in between the gear teeth, which then just makes the problem worse. So it's like, once it fails, it will continue to fail. So you can't push it through at that point. At that point, you have to take the gear off, clean it out, with something, and put it all back together.
What's the other type of way that the filament is fed through?
There's a few different ways, but it's just that particular type of extruder, that brand or whatever they're using in that particular printer, I think is just not a great.
It doesn't have a wheel from both sides the way, for instance, like a wire-fed welder would have a gear from both sides, or a roller pushing.
Well, it kind of does, but I don't know specifically about what that one, like what's causing that one not to work well. But I know some of the other ones that I've used just have a different type. That one's really high tension, and maybe it's just tension's too high to where it's it's causing it to strip out or something. But there's a few different types of extruders. So that one, the extruder is on the bottom of the machine, and it pushes the filament up through a tube that goes to the hot end, and that's called a Bowden tube. And that a lot of good printers have that on them, so it's not a good or bad thing. I'm just pointing out that that's one type. Another type that's really common is to have the extruder on the hot end. So it's actually like pulling the filament into the hot end rather than pushing it up like through a tube. The cool thing about that is that it has a little more strength. There's less like pushing a rope uphill kind of thing. You know, there's less area for it to malfunction in between the extruder and the hot end. And so if you're going to use like any flexible materials like Ninja Flex or anything like that are harder to, well, easier to bend, using the type of extruder that's right next to the hot end is easier there. It's possible in both of them. But anyway, there's just a bunch of different types of extruders. There are different types of hot ends. There's different types of, you know, the way that the carriage moves. Like you guys are working on a Delta printer, and that's a brand name, but that's also a type of printer with the 3 arms that go up and down. That's just called a Delta style printer. And then you have a Cartesian, which is more the XYZ, more traditional, what you would expect, like out of a CNC or something.
Right.
So there's a bunch of different variations on printers for sure.
One of the things I learned very quickly is that you can have the hot, what is it? Hot end? Hot head?
The hot end. Yeah, hot end.
Hot end. I had it too hot, and what was happening is as it was for whatever reason that was the wrong temperature, and when I was trying my test pieces of just like making a basic cube, it came out like one corner would kind of lift up and then the whole thing would like lose its shape. And then playing around with different temperatures, I found what works for the filament that I have. You know, it's a learning process. It's kind of fun.
We made a nice little pile of spaghetti, which was kind of fun. That was cute.
Well, there's a bunch of different ways that 3D prints can fail. And I want to hear more about like how you guys plan to use this. That's what I'm really interested in. But I think some people who don't have any experience with 3D printing, this stuff might be helpful as well, real quickly. The 2 big things that I've seen in my somewhat limited 3D printing experience is under extrusion, where it's not actually squirting out enough plastic, which is, Jimmy, what you ran into. It wasn't squirting out any. But if it's not squirting out enough, that can also be a problem. Like it doesn't have enough to connect the layers, you know, so you end up with the spaghetti will happen that way. The other thing, and I think the biggest problem that I've had, is adhesion to the print bed. So you have the thing that it's printing on, whatever the surface is. Some of them are heated, which makes the plastic adhere to it better. Some of them aren't. And then there's different types of material. Some of them are aluminum. Some of them are glass. Some of them are something called PEI, which is a sheet of kind of a plastic that's made for that. There's a bunch of different types of things that can be on the print bed, and they all have different strengths. They have different weaknesses. They have different types of stuff you have to use to clean them, or different types of filament they work best with, or, you know, whatever. But adhesion is the kind of most important or first important thing in a print, because if you don't get that first layer to stick down really well, then it comes loose, and then you get the spaghetti, right? And then you get the print head dragging the print with it all around the thing, and then it's ruined. And that's also why you will get some corners lifting, David, like you mentioned earlier. You'll get like a corner of it. It's because it's not adhering enough to the print bed. One way around that is to use what's called a raft, where if it's going to print a cube that's, say, 20 centimeters or 20 millimeters, it will start at like 40 millimeters and start printing a single layer, like a flat raft that goes around and connects to the thing that you're actually printing. And that just helps hold all the surface down to the table.
Oh, something that you would have to sand away or cut away?
Yeah. You cut away after. But it just helps with the actual print. And then, you know, when it's all done, then you would, cut it away.
I've already learned more in the last 5 minutes than I have in the couple of articles that I've read. Yeah.
Well, it's weird because information like that, I've never found like a super good spot with like, okay, you know nothing about 3D printing? Here's the basic stuff you need to know. Here are the words that you'll run into, and here's what they mean. You know, I'm sure it's out there. I don't know where that thing is. I do know that Matter Hackers is a company that I really like. They sponsored some giveaway stuff for our Making It 100 event. They do have an article that is basically like if your printer is messing up, here are the ways it's probably messing up and how to fix it. So, you know, you could look up in that article and say, well, it's doing this, and then it will have the fix right beneath it. So that's pretty good. And there's probably some other resources out there like that. But anyway, getting used to like the wording and just the terms and stuff, I think is probably like a good way to start, even if you don't have a printer yet. Just start learning that stuff, so you know what you're talking about. When you're reading.
Yeah.
But anyway, there's tons of technical stuff we could talk about, but I'm really curious how you guys are going to use 3D printing.
Dave,
well,
you can go.
Well, like I said, I want.
I think of an answer.
Jimmy doesn't have an answer.
No, the only plans I have is what I mentioned earlier, is a little place for my iPod to clip onto the lens. And so in my mind, I already have this planned out. And Bob, you can steer me in the right direction if this isn't the way to go. But I have this little Shure mic that sits on top of the camera and points at my face, right? And then I'm going to build a little clip that kind of snaps around the lens. So it's the size of the lens, but maybe just a little bit smaller, so it wants to snap on there. And then on top of that, a second piece that I'll probably glue on would be the piece that holds the little iPod or the phone that I'm going to use. And then it's going to, between that little clip and the microphone, it's going to wedge itself into that microphone, and it should be nice and sturdy and secure. So my thought was to do two pieces, the clip that goes over the lens and then the clip that holds the iPod, and then glue them together. Oh, to me, that just sounds like the more simple way instead of printing it all in one piece.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think there's a right or wrong way to do something like that. It depends on like what your print capabilities are. If you could print that all as one piece, if your bed's big enough, that's one thing to consider. And also, if it's going to be a really complex piece that has a bunch of possibilities for failure, it's like an all or nothing if you do it as one.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, my
Whereas
thought is...
if you do it as two,
yeah,
one might work, one might not. But
and one of the things that I haven't completely understood yet is there will be some overhang type of stuff, especially when I print the part that's going to hold the iPod, because there's going to be that little slot or groove, and so depending on which way it sits on the bed as it's printing, there may or may not be an overhang, and I still have to understand like the best way to print things, and if there is overhang, what do you do to support that? I've seen a couple articles and whatever.
Yeah,
and I don't know if like when you design stuff in Fusion, does it automatically add these things, or do I need to use the software that I'm using to run the 3D printer to add these supports? I'm not sure.
Well, that's a good thing to think about. You can definitely model in your own supports if you think it's worthwhile. And I think a kind of a pro modeler would do that because they would be able to understand like the best way to do them and the best places to do them. I've never modeled in my own supports. I just use the slicer software and say, give me supports. And then it knows from the math, it can understand, well, like the angle here is greater than it should be for us to get a good print out of it. So we're going to add a support there, and so the support actually has a lot to do with how steep of an angle needs to change from like a layer to a layer. And so if the angle's not super steep, well, I guess if it is steep, if it's not flat, the overhang's not too flat, it can probably do it without supports. It just depends on the specific model. Mm-hmm. There's no right or wrong there. But also another thing to think about is because print time is such a big deal and such like a consuming thing, the way that you think about something you're modeling in your head, especially a utility piece like that, you may be thinking of it as like a big solid object or like a flat piece that's the same size as the iPod or something like that, but you probably don't actually need a big flat piece in that case. And so if you can instead make a frame or make a flat piece with cutouts, that's just going to cut down your print time because it's just less plastic.
Yeah.
So, when you're modeling, you can think about ways to cut down the actual amount of plastic that's going out. And then when you lay it on the print bed in your slicing software, how you have it oriented on the print bed will say how quickly it can print, how much support material it needs, and all that stuff. So there's kind of like a bunch of variables at every step of the way, which doesn't make it any easier.
Right.
But there's a bunch of ways to do it.
And so that's where I'm at. I haven't thought beyond that. I thought if I can get past the cookie cutters and past this phone holder for my camera, then I can know my limits or capabilities and go from there. It's, I tell so many people, like, come up with the project and get the tool, but sometimes you have to have the tool and then you kind of use that to figure out what your limitations are and work from there. So we'll see. Maybe this leads me to maybe I fall in love with it, and maybe I get one of the bigger ones. Or I know there's different types of 3D printers that use different types of filament for ones that can print finer. Correct me if I'm wrong. Right? Mm-hmm. I don't know. Maybe the one I have can print fine, and I just don't know. Maybe there's a setting I need to change.
Yeah, well, the fineness of the print, like the detail, has a lot to do with the size of the nozzle. So the actual little thing that squirts out, that size. 0.4 is kind of a standard at this point between a lot of printers, so most of them will have that. And there are some that have a smaller nozzle. But that's just one thing to look at, when you get a printer, is that how fine you actually need it. Now, if you're trying to squirt plastic through a 0.4 nozzle versus a 0.2 nozzle, one's going to take twice as long as the other, right? I mean, it's the same amount of plastic, it's just going through a smaller hole. So, you have to, that's a trade-off you have to think about. You get that fine precision, but it's going to take longer. Mm-hmm. So sometimes that's not worthwhile. Sometimes you just want to have like if you're going to sand it anyway, and you're going to be doing body filler and stuff, having super fine detail maybe doesn't even matter.
That's something I want to talk about a little later on. It is the body filler and how to refine your printed piece post. But I'm also curious to see if Jimmy has any ideas on what he could potentially use that for, or if he has any thoughts on how to work that into his workflow.
No.
Simple, real simple.
I'm kidding. No, I have a lot to say. I'm just kidding. The funny thing is I help out at Danny's school with the young kids, like high schoolers, and they have a few multi printers. Is it multi? Bob, you just use yours. What is it called? The multi what?
Ultimaker?
Ultimaker. Yeah, they have a couple of those. They say they like those the most. And
they're awesome.
Yeah, so that's what I heard. But the funny thing is, and I love 3D printings, and I love the way, a lot of people know my opinion of the digital revolution is a positive one, and I think the 3D printers are awesome. I just spent so many years just whipping things I need up out of styrene. So I do a pencil sketch and then I make it out of styrene and it's rock solid. I could make a form and vacuum form it. So I've spent 30 years just making things that I need no matter what, regardless of how I get there. So when the 3D printer comes along, I'm thinking, oh, I can make anything I want. I'm like, I could make anything I want anyway. I don't necessarily, it's like hard for me to shoehorn that process into my day-to-day routine. And I want to, but what I find sometimes with the students, which is my original thought, I'll go to the students and they'll be printing a cylinder, and they're like, come back from another class, and it's like an hour later, and they're still printing the cylinder. Like, what is that for? Oh, it holds the electronics. And like, I'll grab like a milk bottle, and I'll say, you see this shape right here in the neck of this milk bottle? It's exactly the same shape you just spent 2 hours printing. Oh yeah. Oh wow, I didn't realize it. So I think there's a time and place, and we got to guide young kids and say, if you're going to make a capsule that's going to hold electronics, unless it's really styled and part of the ultimate product, you really can forego using a 3D printer in many, many, many cases. But Bob, like the beautiful helmet you just made, that's gorgeous. I would have immediately approached it with styrene and vacuum forms and stuff, but you broke it up into this amazing process and you were able to get this cool helmet. And I just was amazed that the way you were able to cut that up. And it would be interesting to see a video on your fusion technique.
Yeah, a lot of people have asked about that, actually, because I kind of glossed over that, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a time and place, because if you put it in that video, probably would have lost viewers early on. But if you do put it out as a secondary video, and follow up and say, how you made the volume and then sliced it, like, do you just project a line through it and just say cut along the projection? Or do you push a body through it and then just say have the body be the cut? There's lots of choices that I'm learning now. I just don't know what are the best choices as we go forward. But as far as my 3D printing experience, there'll be a time and place where I need this. In the meantime, me and Jacob are just going to keep experimenting with making the cubes. And the one thing I wanted to do was letters, because I teach a course in 3-dimensional letters, or at least I do one particular lecture on 3-dimensional letters and how students should really understand 3D letters, because they're graphic designers. And then all of a sudden they're in the world and somebody wants to sign and they've never even experienced 3D letters or even paid attention to them. So I think 3D printing is one quick, accessible way for students early in college and early in high school to get into 3D lettering. You know, it's not CNCing, which, you know, obviously a lot of people want to CNC. I'm like, oh, that's great. Have you ever used a saw? Oh, no, why would I need a saw? Because you need to prepare your material to go into the machine. But if you have a 3D printer, it's a little bit easier. It's sort of right out of the box. You're just creating volumes as opposed to needing plywood cut to the right size, fastened to the table. So there's a lot of other disciplines that go along with CNC routering as opposed to the additive version of 3D printing. So 3D printing is good for young makers getting started, I think. It's just a matter of being sure they're taking their time and energy to something that really can't be just immediately found in their environment.
You make a good point of the different disciplines, because you said your student didn't realize they could make this cylinder a much faster and easier way, and you don't know these things until you have experience in a bunch of different fields. And then once you do that, you're kind of like you learn to problem solve. You're like, oh, this tool is best for this. This tool is best for this. And it's
so it's just a matter of they were introduced to the 3D printer and they're like, oh, let me just make it on the 3D printer. Where like if they just looked around in their environment or in the recycling bin, or just get a couple of extrusions from the plastic shop, they can have what they need right there. And they could probably mock up what they need to make in literally minutes compared to sending something to print for an hour and a half.
That's why nothing will beat experience when it comes to these types of things, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, the experience will lead you down to be able to use a tool in whatever way you need to get the job done. Yeah. Jimmy's a prime example of that. You could give him a bandsaw, and he could do just about anything with it. I mean, and I'm not like, trying to blow smoke for you. I'm serious. Like, you could make anything out of the bandsaw because you have enough experience with it that you understand its limitations. You understand ways to use it that are maybe non-traditional, whatever. Versus if you put me in a shop with a whole bunch of tools, I may gravitate towards something else first because I have more experience with something else to get the same job done. So I think the 3D printer is kind of the same way. Yeah. It's ending up as that thing for young people now. Well, if I've only got one tool, it's going to be a 3D printer because it can do anything that I need it to do. I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I just mean I think that's the mentality that's being taken with 3D printers in general, is that they can do everything. Why would I need anything else? I don't think that's a great thing. I'm agreeing with you guys. Yeah.
No, it's definitely a matter of, making something that can only exist because you need to make it in a 3D printer. Like I said, a lot of these young designers are just making electronic enclosures, which, Radio Shack and DigiKey sells all these things. You could just buy them off the shelf, or just get a plastic compact and put an electronic box together, or whatever it is. But as far as my digital processing experience, I really like the idea. And Dave, you just did it full-heartedly, where you make an object and you use that to make a cookie. So when you think of a 3D printer and the end goal is a cookie, it's like, how the hell did you get there? Like, if you just saw a cookie in 3D printer, you probably wouldn't immediately think make a cookie cutter. If you weren't exposed to that first.
Yeah, Bill from Punish Props just made rings. Yeah. Did you guys see that? He made rings. Yeah. But he printed the ring with the 3D printer and then used that for a pewter, to make a pewter ring, which was awesome. I never would have thought to do that. I'm like, oh yeah, you use that. I
love that. Like dissecting these processes and then making them part of a bigger picture and not necessarily being the picture.
Yeah.
So that's one thing I really like, and that I just haven't found that path from me personally for 3D printing, But Dave, last week when you just showed a picture somewhere, I saw a picture of your cookie cutters you made, and I was like, okay, that's it. I got to really start thinking about how to use this 3D printer as a means to a different end, not necessarily a means to a 3D print. And that's how I'll be able to utilize it. And it's there now. And next time I hang out with Jacob, I'm going to ask him to show me what I did wrong and how to access files and stuff. Because we weren't using my Mac, we were using my old notebook that runs my CNC machine. And that thing is just, the thing smokes and whistles every time you hit a button.
The one thing that I
want to do is CNC.
The one thing that I haven't seen is that everybody predicted 5-8 years ago is you can just print out parts that you need. My dishwasher stopped working. Whirlpool will have a file that I can download and print out. That's not happening yet. And my guess is because it's not as easy as that, because there's a lot of complications where you don't know what there'd be customer support, like, oh, I can't get this thing to print, or you're using the wrong type of filament or whatever. And do you think we're going to get to a world where we can just print our parts?
I think we will. I don't think
so.
It's going to be cost effective, because the materials to print that stuff is cheap, but to get a machine that is reliable enough on a long-term basis, on a regular enough basis to make that realistic, that's where the cost is. Because, you know, you buy a $500 3D printer, you run into all these issues that we're talking about. You can still get it to work, but it's not reliable enough for you to say, like, yeah, I'm going to download a file and print it out and put it in my refrigerator and make it work better or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
You know, at this point, you can pay $4,000 or $5,000 and probably get a machine that is reliable enough to do that. But the cost is so high there that that's not realistic for most people. And that's way, like, you know, uneven for what you're actually saving by buying this, instead of buying this like $2 piece of plastic from Whirlpool or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we've got a long way to go before the quality comes down in price enough to make that realistic.
Yeah.
I think you'll start seeing more service-oriented spots. Like you have, like, oh, I have this 3D file from my client. Can you print it for me?
Yeah.
You know, like Kinko's, just like Kinko's. You know, I know that already exists, but it exists in the way like you got to like shapeways and there's. But I would love to see a store where you could just walk into and say, hey, I got this part. Can you bring it up? Oh, yeah. Okay. What's the best way to do that? And then you have some technician who knows 70 different ways to do it the right way. Go, okay, don't worry. We'll handle it. It's going to be $100. It'll be done tomorrow morning. That would be great. So this way, people that are designing who understand the process but don't necessarily have the time to learn it or want to do it can get things made and done.
In the UPS store, I don't know if they're still doing it, but at one point they were doing that, where they were starting to put these high-end Stratasys, which is like a really high-end brand, printer in some of their stores, and you could mail, or you could, you know, email in a file and have it printed and pick it up the next day, or they could ship it directly to you. And I think the only reason that worked, if it worked for them, I don't know if it did or not, but if that worked, it's because those machines were so high quality and so reliable that it wasn't like, oh yeah, we'll send it to you in a few days when we can get the printer working well enough to get your part printed. You know, it was like, okay, it will print and we will ship it to you. You know, so I think that does exist, but there again, you know, these $20,000 3D printers in a UPS store, that's not accessible for even businesses.
Well, that's good. So like I could print it on my little Delta, but if I know I could bring it to these guys and they have color and all, so I could do a toy prototype, or a product prototype and have it printed. Like my this thing I'm working on right now for this, you know, cutting this whole thing out of a chunk of aluminum. As far as my Witchblade 3 that I've been working on, if I could make a prototype of that in Fusion and then just have someone quickly 3D print it for me, I could really understand it. Instead, right now I'm just kind of playing in the dark, but that's fine. It's part of my process. But if I could get a full design on the computer and then have it 3D printed where I could really play with it and hold it and touch it and go, okay, No, but I mean, if it was more easily accessible for me, and it will be, it's just a matter of time. I totally, you know, it's just this long learning curve. And like I've said it before, and when we've talked about these types of learning curves, it's like just a little bit at a time. Like if I know that like every couple days we're upstate, I said to Taylor, I go, okay, my goal today is to cut my name on the side of this piece of aluminum. And I did that last week, and I'm showing you guys. It happens to be this piece that I used as a bigger chunk. So I did that, and I felt totally accomplished. So I went back and I played with Fusion for a couple, like maybe a week. And I said, okay, I'm going to pocket. And I made this pocket the size of the Leatherman profile. That's on my Instagram. I said, I'm going to make this pocket. I crashed the machine twice. I tried to figure out what I was doing wrong. I know what I was doing wrong, but I still don't know how to fix what I was doing wrong. So I just did a workaround. And then when I cut the whole thing out, the Leatherman didn't fit into it. It was 400 thousandths too skinny, according to my calipers. So I got a 400 thousandths shim, which is basically a piece of brass, about a 16th of an inch. And I opened it up and I stuck it between the product and the fixed jaw, and it moved the whole product over that much. And I ran the program one more time, and the whole thing, even though it took 10 minutes for it to do all of its jazz, it just, every time it rubbed that wall, it made that wall 400 thousandths skinnier in every layer it went. So I was able, I'm able to kind of like work through the dark and figure out workarounds, but there's better ways, and I'm learning slowly.
Yeah.
Same with the 3D printing. I mean, it all applies to all this new technology. And then once the spring comes and I start plasma cutting, that's going to be a whole new ball of problems to deal with.
Well, but that's more of like a kind of 2D plotter, right?
Which one?
I mean, the plasma. I mean, it's still CNC controlled, but it's still basically like a 2D plane where it's cutting things out.
Yeah, absolutely. But the only thing that makes me nervous is that I got to thinking like there's 700 ports and like there's like 15 ports and like 8 wires.
Oh.
So the amount of wrong choices is like thousands. They sent me some. They're like, oh, this one goes there, and there. But 4 of the wires aren't marked at all. So I have to literally trace them back through the wired carriage and see what motor they're on. So it was funny. When I first got the machine, they all had like these little loose tags on them that said X, Y, and Z. I'm like, I better secure those. Then I got sidetracked. And by the time the machine went into the container, I'm like, oh, 4 of those tags have like floated off and are gone. So,
Whoops.
But, you know, the thing was manufactured and it works for somebody. It'll work for me. It's just a matter of me just dealing with it and confronting and problem solving without burning out a motor. Which is my big fear.
Yeah. You know, even that's fixable.
Yep.
Just expensive.
I think just to relate to our friends over at Reclaimed Audio, I think there's the potential of 3D printing to help lessen your carbon footprint on this earth by when you do need that part for your dishwasher or refrigerator of actually making it your own instead of that thing being put on a truck and then delivered to your house. So I think, you know, the future hopefully is going to be a lot cleaner and a lot more efficient as far as getting these parts and stuff.
It's funny. Obviously, the 3D printing is in its infancy. And then, like Bob, you made a perfect example in your movie of making, if it's a prop for either a movie or if it's a prop for Halloween or if it's just a personal collection like you're making it for, you made a beautiful object and you broke it down and you made it. But most of the time when you see 3D printed objects, at least like at Maker Faire and stuff, do you guys remember when we were kids, you'd go to Miami and this thing would spit out like a wax dolphin with like clothes and make a wax, and like it's completely useless. You get it and you're like, okay, that's cool. It was fun to watch it happen, but now, you know, the experience is over. I have this thing. It's like, what is the point of it? Like I would ask my grandmother all the time, stick money in the machine so I could see the machine close and it would injection mold a wax figure and then it'd spit it out. I just want to see the action happen. So like at Maker Faire, you see all these tchotchkes that are like pointless. And then like I remember when the Dremel thing came out, I'm not associated with Dremel at all, but I went to Austin Maker Faire or whatever and they had this thing. And the table is just full of tchotchkes. Nothing is actually usable for anything. It's just like a tchotchke of a frog, a tchotchke of a bug, a tchotchke of a dice. And it's like, okay, like the experience is cool. So it's almost like having like a race car and no racetrack to go on. You know, you just keep revving the motor.
Well, it's who you.
But most people,
yeah.
Not,
I mean,
you know,
it's
like
who has it. It's like you put a bandsaw in the tool of a creative person as compared to a non-creative person. Yeah, the non-creative person is going to create a bunch of cubes, where the creative guy is going to make a Sam Maloof chair or whatever. You know, it's the tool is still not doing the thinking and the creative part for you. You still have to do that.
You know what has to happen? All the 3D printing companies need to hire people that make complicated parts. Because I see the same gear. I see the same thing. I see the same. Every time you walk up to a 3D printer company, you have the same few things in front of them. I don't know, this is just me. Maybe I'm being overly critical. No. But instead of making tchotchkes, I want to see, like Bob, you made the ring, printed ring for the GoPro. You made the helmet. You know, I want to see real objects.
Yeah.
That aren't just landfill. Like I want to see objects in real use more often.
Yeah, and I think the prop community is really big for that. Now, granted, that's not like, you know, a prop is not something that's
it is. It is because it's
on a daily basis.
Absolutely. I totally don't think there's anything less than that. You know, I don't look at that any less than anything that's useful, honestly.
Well, no, but I mean, I think that's a really good example of taking 3D printing as a medium rather than as a product, right? So it's just like saying, I'm going to make a fiberglass helmet, or I'm going to make a foam helmet. I'm going to make a 3D printed helmet. It's still going to end up looking like a helmet, or it's going to end up looking like a rifle or whatever. And somebody was actually asking me the other day about, like, because I've done a few helmets now, and asking me about kind of what was next, and a certain project that I won't talk about now. And I hadn't really told anybody about this, but my whole idea with the helmets is for me to learn a set of skills it's not really about having helmets for characters. It's about me having a pattern to learn skills over. So the first one was about learning how to work with foam. And a helmet was a good way to do that because it was something that like I could identify with or whatever. 3D printing and the finishing process is the next one in that process. Further down the road, there's going to be making a helmet that I can then learn how to do large molding and casting. And then past that, there's going to be fiberglass. And then so this is like an intentional set of learning exercises.
This is all,
and these are all just different medium.
Bob's building up to move off the planet. That's what he's doing.
Me and Elon Musk, we're finding a new planet somewhere.
SpaceX.
Yeah. But so, yeah, I mean, I think that's the right attitude to have. I think it's catchy and it's interesting to kids and stuff to just be able to print things out. But that's not going to give you a reason to use a tool long term. That's like saying, I'm going to buy a scroll saw because I want to be able to make this one type of scroll thing. When you're done with that, then what? So you have to keep coming up with new ways to use it or ways to integrate it into a larger project or whatever.
Me personally, I have to go through, I have to make all those tchotchkes that I was just criticizing. I have to make them to understand how to do this and then how to incorporate it. So, I kind of dumped on the tchotchke world, but I have to do it to go through it. I really have to learn. So I'll be making
and I think
frogs and spiders and little panda bears.
I think the reason that people do that, like same reason you would do it is the same reason companies do it, because it's a low impact way to test out the tool, right?
Yeah.
That's like, you wouldn't, for the first time you were explaining the bandsaw to somebody, you wouldn't go and make a 50-letter sentence out of MDF. You would take a 3-letter word and you would cut that out just to show them how it worked or something.
Yeah.
I mean, you might, but anybody other human other than the world.
I made a face.
You get that instant gratification before you fail.
Yeah, and it's a low impact or not low impact, low risk.
Yeah, low investment in time and energy.
Low investment, that's the word. Yeah, of what the tool can do. So I think that's why people do it. And you're right, it's a necessary part of the process for sure.
Yeah.
Well, I think the 3D printing stuff I think has a big place that a lot of people haven't identified yet within their workflow. And obviously it's not for everybody, just like every tool is not for everybody, but it'll be interesting to me to see how you guys end up kind of bringing it into your.
It was fun. Did you guys know Jesse, who makes the Crywheels? Is it called Crywheel? I never understand. Sear wheels.
Sear wheel.
The performance wheels. It's maybe like an 8 or 9 foot circle. Is it more like a 7 foot circle?
6 or 7. I don't know.
That could like suspend in the center and fly. It was in one of my vlogs. I covered his stuff. But remember last year we saw him, and then this year his like production has been amazing. His growth as far as, and a lot of that has to do with the part of his is the 3D printer. He 3D prints these little junctions that connect the electronics in each section. I think he makes 6 sections, and they have to dismantle and then reassemble. And he 3D prints these parts, which is amazing because if he had to injection mold them, he never would be able to afford that. Nobody would. It cost you $50,000 to make a 6-cavity tool, and then the process of going through that, and then no factory is going to make a tool regardless of how much it costs, unless they're going to make 60,000 of them or 100,000 of them. And he probably only needed maybe 100 at this point, and so he designed and developed them and printed them himself, which I was so impressed with to see that like development in just a short 1 year, that he's been able to really up his game.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's a matter of needing that need. Like we always say, you need that project that's going to get you through the storm.
So Jesse Hewson, Cyrcraft.com, CYRcraft.com. It's pretty cool, the project that Jimmy's talking about for sure.
And also all around good dude.
Oh yeah.
Sweet guy.
Cool guy.
He stayed in my room in Boston. He was so excited to come. He just drove there. He didn't know where to stay. I said, "You staying in my room?" I said, "Really?" I'm like, "I got a 2-bedroom thing. I'm not going to make you sleep out here in your car." That was his option. Is I'm going to sleep in my car. I'm like, "No, you're not."
Well, not that I'm all knowing. I'm just dipping my toes in it, really. But do you guys have any questions about 3D printing or finishing or any of that stuff that I can answer that might be helpful to other people?
An important question is, I noticed you use Bondo in your video. Yeah. Bondo does not stick to all those different filaments, does it? There's only certain filaments that it'll work with, right? Because you can't feather Bondo on styrene. I know that, for instance. And is that an ABS extrusion? Like, what is the extrusion that Bondo will etch into? That's the question.
I've not heard of one that it doesn't.
Really?
That's very possible, but yeah, I don't know.
You're able to get a nice feather from the Bondo, like to zero feather. Yeah. Oh, cool. I didn't realize that. I thought because I know when you make styrene models, for instance, and you just use styrene sheet, the way to fill cracks and to do body work in air quotes is to use plastic wood, because plastic wood has acetone in it and it etches into the surface. So when you let it dry long enough, and you could sand it, you could feather it down and it will literally feather into zero. Because a lot of times if you use Bondo or plastic wood, when you go to feather it, it breaks off at the little small parts and you can't get it to feather. It doesn't stick. It doesn't etch into the surface. And so that was my question with Bondo.
I've not seen that, but I mean, I've only used it on that one project on PLA plastic. So I have not had success with ABS plastics, and I kind of gave up on it early. I just had trouble, and then PLA worked well, so that's kind of what I've used. But there's tons of different types of materials that you can print with. So, yeah, not sure about that.
Yeah, interesting.
Isn't plastic wood and Bondo the same formula?
No, well, Bondo is catalyzed. It's a polyester resin. It's catalyzed. You add the hardener to it. Plastic wood is all acetone that will etch. I don't know what the vehicle is. Acetone, which is the fluid it hangs out in. But I don't know what the actual material is. But once it dries, it etches into the surface of like a styrene or an ABS.
Gotcha. I've learned so much
Bondo
today.
won't. Bondo will not. That's the difference. Bondo will not. Bondo kind of more adheres, and now somebody could probably correct me and troll me. But it's been my experience that Bondo doesn't etch into material. It like sticks. Whereas like acetone will etch into stuff. And because Bondo sticks and doesn't etch, it doesn't always stick. It won't stick to a lot of plastics, in my experience. So that's why when I saw you getting some nice feathering and some beautiful joinery that faded right into the paint job, I was impressed.
Interesting. Now, I didn't get to say it in that video, but I used regular Bondo. But most people recommend on 3D prints using the spot putty and glazing stuff by Bondo, but it's just in a tube. It's a single mixture. I don't know chemically what's different about that, but I know it's a single thing that you don't have to mix, and it's just easier to get in small doses.
Yeah, those two are more like plastic wood and the spot putty. Yeah, so Dave, that might be what you're talking about. Those two are more like.
Okay.
Yeah. I had to order that, and it didn't show up in time, and I was just like, needed to move on the project, so I just used regular Bondo.
You can get that at most auto zones. They sell it in when you're trying to do the hack weekend body filler stuff.
Yeah.
In a little aisle, they sell it.
You guys remember when you were kids, the disgusting bubble gum that came in the tube that you would squeeze out? That's all I could think of. Yeah. That's all I could think about when you were talking about.
I think that was past my time.
It was like a toothpaste tube, but it was bubble gum, right? Oh.
Sorry.
I never saw that one. We had Big League Chew, and then the tape one, too. That was another one.
Oh, yeah.
They still have Big League Chew. And when I was in the Bahamas, I went to this fancy house, and it was right next door to the guy that started bubble tape.
No way.
He was crazy rich because of bubble tape.
That's funny.
Was his house shaped like a big bubble tape container? Big green bubble tape container?
No, but it was on one of the ends of the islands of the Bahamas looking out over the ocean. So,
wow.
Yeah. Cool. Well, if anybody has any 3D printing questions or whatever, tweet them at us. We'll help if we can. I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe. So what have you guys been watching? You guys watch anything cool?
Yes. I've talked about the Vlog Brothers before. Subscribe to the Vlog Brothers because it's two guys, and they basically create a vlog, and they kind of bounce back and forth between each other. But once in a while, they have guests come on, and I am introduced to so many awesome people through these guests. And a few days ago, they had this lady named Tessa Violet, and she's a vlogger and a musician, and it's an awesome, super awesome channel. And she got a great personality. What I would also... The video that I would start with is she had a video called Music Copyright Explained, and broke it down like nobody has broken down copyright before. I was like, it's so well done. And so that is my pick of the week, Tessa Violet.
I've seen her in a lot of things over the years. She's been around YouTube for a really long time.
Cool.
Done lots of good stuff. In fact, we saw her play at
VidCon.
VidCon. Yeah, she played a song on the stage at VidCon.
I was so overwhelmed. But I got my VidCon ticket. I'm ready to go for next year. It was one of those, if you are a creator, you should really consider going to VidCon. They have it in a couple different continents now, but it really set me on the right path, and just it changed everything about my business. And I'm so thankful that I went last year that I'm so excited to go next year.
Same here.
All right. I'm going to promote Izzy's second channel, What's Izzy Up To? Everybody knows Izzy. Izzy Swan is the inventor extraordinaire who makes everything you can think of. And Izzy has a second channel called What's Izzy Up To? And he has the Mega Maker Show. I don't know if everybody's watched that. I watched it the other night. I've been on it, and I've watched it a couple times. And most recently I watched it the other night. He had on Greg's Garage and Ben Ueda talking about architecture and communicating to your clients. And the Mega Maker Show by Izzy Swan. And I was surprised it only had, right now, this one show's only got 680 views. And it's a great resource, and Izzy's really opening the door. He's trying to get, top-of-the-line professionals on every episode and discussing real important things. And I watched Ben and Greg talk the other night, and I learned quite a bit just from listening to those two. I mean, Ben, you can't stop learning from every time you hang out with him. But check out Izzy's show. There's many. I mean, I was on one of them, but everybody knows enough about me. But he has a lot of other shows with a lot of other professional makers, and some that aren't even on YouTube. But take a look. What's Izzy up to? Izzy's second channel.
Yeah, that's a good one. So for me, I don't know if you two saw this. I'm sure you did. The Redsmith. I don't know if we've talked about it before.
Yes, amazing. Yes, amazing.
So I've been subscribed to Redsmith for a while because he makes excellent videos. They're just really well made, makes cool stuff. But then this last week, he made a video about this podcast.
Yeah.
I mean, kind of. He made the three of us each marking knives, and you just got to watch the video. He goes through, it's like he's listening to every episode of the podcast all the way through. It's really cool. And
it was fun watching all the titles. Yeah, it was amazing. It kind of brought a tear to my eye. And watching all the titles of all the episodes we did, I'm like, oh, wow, I want to listen to that. Oh, we talked about that? That looks like an interesting one. He had 100 of the episodes, just the titles scrolling through the bottom of the video.
Yeah.
Which is great.
A long time.
Made us look way more interesting than we are. For sure.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, you guys got anything else for this week?
I'm good.
Okay.
I'm 3D.
I'm trying to eat in between every take, so I apologize. I'm trying to eat lunch. I haven't eaten all day.
Looks like cheese and crackers.
Cool. Well,
yeah, I just got a holiday package from Tormac. It's like,
nice.
All kinds of snivelly food. It's my lunch for the day.
You could CNC crackers with no risk. If you mess them up, no big deal.
You know what's great?
C and cheese, dude. Right there. C and cheese. Please make a video about C and cheese.
I will, but I crashed my Tormac twice. The minute I hit cycle start, and I have my hand on that emergency shut-off button because I don't know where the cutting edge is going to go. And it goes, and then it just buries itself into the aluminum, and I hit stop right away. That happened to me twice, and it took a few times to get the machine to recover from go back to XYZ. But I was talking to Kevin Lazat today. We were just exchanging ideas about this machine, and he said, stick a piece of styrofoam in there so you could see what you're going to get. And I said, I wish I would have thought of doing that. So thank you, Kevin. I've ran the file a little bit, ghost with no material in it. But he says if you do that, and then you get your zero where you think it's supposed to be, and then if it's not there, then nothing's going to get hurt, severely hurt. So that's what you just basically gave me the same idea. Next time I'm going to get cheese.
Yeah, I mean you have to throw the styrofoam away. The cheese,
I could eat it. I could have the chips shoot in my mouth while I'm working.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I don't know if we'll have a show next week.
I was just going to say, that's only going to contribute to your mouse and rat problem, dude.
It's right where the rats are. When I leave, the rats probably open up the Tormac and they probably use it all successfully, and then they clean up before I get back.
That'd be awesome if you go out there and there's little rats driving around in little awesome cars made out of
construction helmets.
Yeah.
And then they make exactly what I've been trying to make perfectly. And I'm like, who brought this? Did Santa Claus bring it?
Cool. Well, I want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
That'll happen in between this show and next show. So guess that's it for this week. Unless you guys got anything else.
That's it. Thank you, guys.
Cool. All right. See you guys next week.
Later.
That's it. I was going to say I love you, Lucky.